Games can be very melodramatic, but sometimes you just want to laugh. I'm Falcon, and today on gameranx, we're bringing you the top 10 funniest games of 2016. Number 10 is Ratchet & Clank, which when it originally happened was one of those games that had a rare charm to it, but that was massively overhauled with the remake. Essentially all of the charm is retained, but the game itself is significantly better, looks significantly better, and more importantly, contains a much more fleshed out story segment of itself. As such, all of the humor, the fourth wall breaking, the fake commercials, and pretty much everything else comes through significantly better than it would have otherwise, and that's great. Number 9, Goat Simulator Waste of Space. And if you thought the original Goat Simulator was funny, I mean, just basically figure leaving the planet. That's how they've been promoting it. Goat Simulator is leaving the planet, is essentially their marketing line. But the best thing about it is that they talk about how goat simulation is leaving the planet. The thing that's so great about it is they spent a ton of time creating a detailed world that references pop culture in like basically every chance it gets. And it's still Goat Simulator. Like, it's not a different game. It is the stupidest, crappiest, most awful game, although with a lot of new mechanics added, it's Goat Simulator. Now, it's a DLC and it requires the original Goat Simulator, but I mean, if you buy all of it together, the package costs somewhere between $10 and $15. You play as a goat doing goat things. Well, actually, that's not even what Goat Simulator is. I just like to say that because A, it sounds really stupid, and the game is really stupid, but there's really no way to describe what Goat Simulator is if you haven't already played it. It's like Tony Hawk if the idea were just to be crap, but somehow it all works out to be incredibly good and enjoyable. So just play Goat Simulator Waste of Space. Just do it. You'll laugh your damn head off. I swear you will. Number 8, Job Simulator is a game that takes place as an archival thing in the year 2050, in a world where machines have replaced all jobs. It's essentially a satirization of a lot of things. First, it's kind of to make fun of jobs. Like, it takes basically all the stupidest elements of jobs and gives you access to them. That's the best way to put it. It's over colorful, it's oftentimes very, very overstimulating, and everything has basically no logic to it. The other thing it satirizes is the idea that jobs are going to become outdated. And because they're going to become outdated, we may eventually look at them as an absurd thing. There's actually several levels to the comedy in this game, some of which are maybe not laugh out loud funny, but will punch you right in the irony in the best way. Also, let's just flat out say this, if you find a Let's Play by a funny person, they're really funny. The game is automatically designed to make it easy to laugh. Number 7, Overcooked is a competitive cooking game that I can best describe as kinda like Bomberman, but not a hell of a lot like Bomberman, just enough to the point where it's worth mentioning that it's kinda like Bomberman. It's much, much more chaotic, and while the humor in the game itself is actually pretty funny, the funniest thing is just playing this game with a few other people. Now, in 2-player, you probably have a fairly easy time with it because you're really only yelling at one person. That's the best way I can put it. But the more people you add, the more like utterly absurd this game gets. Everybody is yelling because it doesn't matter what kinds of plans you made. You're like, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do this. We got this. You don't got this. This game's full of goofy little like curveballs it loves to throw at you. And really, it's every kind of like enjoyable and funny game I can think of for a multiplayer, cutesy, competitive situation. Which back in the day, like, seriously, Bomberman scratched that itch for me, but I'm definitely going with Overcooked now. Number 6, Death Road to Canada is basically a lot like if you combine Oregon Trail with an arcade beat-em-up and a roguelike dungeon crawler, except for on an overworld. The humor in this game is derived from how easy it is to fail, and how many different ways there are to fail. I mean, it's essentially a randomly generated Oregon Trail style adventure where you have to cut your way through hordes of zombies. How could that be bad? It's not. There's bizarre stuff like genies and toilets, dogs barking at zombies as a weapon, and it's tough, but every single way you die, well, not every way, but a lot of ways you die, come out to be very funny, especially when you're playing with another person, which I highly recommend. Number 5, Worms WMD is a game that is part of a franchise that's kind of made me laugh for a very long time. I enjoyed Worms in the 90s, and I always thought it was funny, from the little animations when you did something that was going to be of consequence, to all the little goofy sounds, to the fact that they were worms fighting with heavy artillery. As Worms has become more advanced, specifically in this iteration of it, the better and more detailed the grim sort of environments look, the more silly it actually appears because of exactly what's going on. Some of the weapons are outright hilarious, and at no point does the game come off as non-absurdism. And while some people have complained a little bit that it's a bit too familiar, for me that's not a bad thing. There's not really something that substitutes for Worms, in my opinion. It still makes me smile and laugh, and it still gets me really involved. Number 4 is LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens, which takes the plot of Star Wars The Force Awakens, obviously, and makes it into a much more humorous, self-referential Star Wars fan joke fest, essentially. It's basically everything you could expect from sort of a parody of Star Wars The Force Awakens, except for it allows the actual intellectual property to be used. So you get all the actual characters, the actual story, and it just turns out really fun, and it's a lighthearted, pretty much friendly for anyone type game. It's really good, especially for Star Wars fans looking for, some inside humor. Number 3 is Headlander, which is a Metroidvania, essentially doing it through the lens of 70s sci-fi. But it's a Double Fine game, so it's obviously filled with humor. All the dialogue is very funny, it's all well executed, whoever directs their voice actors is very good, and their writers are always top notch. Now, I'm not going to say it is the funniest out of their games, or it's even the best, but it's certainly the best Metroidvania of their games, because I don't think they've ever done that before, honestly. But I can't get enough of Double Fine. If they could make more games at the quality that they make them, I would say let's go. Let's do it. Bring it on. Number 2 is Dead Rising 4, and I'm not really enamored with the change of voice. I mean, Frank West had a very specific voice, and it's weird to hear a different one. But still, it's fine. It's certainly a lot closer to what we want out of Dead Rising than Dead Rising 3. It's funny, it's silly, and although they list it as a survival horror game, is it really that scary? To me, not so much. It's kind of just about being goofy in Zombieland area, right? We want that weird absurdism that kind of tinges Dead Rising just a bit. Dead Rising 4's got it. It has certainly done a good job adapting it to a more modern set of expectations, I'll say that. Number 1 is Shadow Warrior 2, which did a great job taking what was built in 2013 when they rebooted Shadow Warrior and making a pretty funny and well-made action game. Doing it as an FPS was definitely a good idea, and it all came together very well. If you can imagine basically a slightly more Asian-themed, maybe a little bit less offensive Deadpool? I don't know. I'm less offended by Shadow Warrior 2 than I am by Deadpool. I'm not offended by Deadpool, that's not the way I'm saying that, but my sensibilities go, people would care about this less. Well, that's pretty much what you get out of Shadow Warrior 2. It has a lot of personality, and Lo Wang is a very spiteful man. The spite is the best source of the humor in this type of humor. And Lo Wang, he has the spite. Couple of bonus games for you. First is Omnibus, which is just a ridiculous game about a bus that can't stop. It has bad physics. It's hilarious because it has bad physics. There's nothing else to say. Cluster Truck is a physics-based first-person platformer that puts you in a chaotic environment that's ridiculous and silly. And finally, Mega Dimension Neptunia 7 is an immature, meta-aware JRPG game that takes a very self-aware approach and nails it. What did you think was the funniest game of the year? Did we include it on the list or didn't we? Because humor is actually more subjective than video games themselves, so let's have a discussion about that. If you enjoyed this video, please click like. And if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.